Let's design the Galactic Line, and today we're going to talk about the in-world technologies, the spaceships and stuff. I figured I might as well get geeky since I have been working on a lot of the componentry, and maybe someone would like to know more about it. So let's talk about it. What you see in front of you right now is the Gray Moth. The Gray Moth is a very, very price-efficient ship. It's super cheap. When you start the game, you're going to probably start with a tech level 0 economy, maybe with just a splash of tech level 1, which would be more or less similar to Earth right now. When you build stuff, especially spaceships or space stations, the cost of that is deducted from your economy. So if you have 100 points of tech level 0 economy and you build a ship that costs 10 tech level 0 points, you have 90 economy left, and that affects how many people you can support. That affects the welfare of your entire planet. So you have to be careful not to overspend, and that's a big part of designing your ships. So even if you have a high tech level, it's often good to use smaller or simpler components so that you don't really deplete those high tech levels. You don't want to destroy your high skill jobs. Of course, the higher your tech levels are, the easier it is for you to increase the lower tech level economies. So, in the end, it's a fun little feedback loop. But as I was saying, this is a tech level 0 ship, and that means it spends nothing but tech level 0 points, which are the easiest to come by. So let's go over the components. So I guess what I'll do is fire up all the engines and then face the sun a little bit and pause. So first things first, the rocket engines. These are typical chemical engines. These are super, super strong. Rocket engines are the best engines in the game until maybe the last tech levels. They're super strong. The problem is they burn rocket fuel, and rocket fuel is heavy, and you have to carry a lot of it. It's got a relatively low ISP, meaning that you burn a lot of it. So you're going to have a heavy ship, but you're going to have a lot of thrust, and you're going to risk running out of fuel. So it's really a trade-off. Most of the ships that you're going to want to build are going to not use rocket engines, except for maybe as emergency combat speed stuff, just because you burn through a lot of rocket fuel using them. But their thrust is so high. That said, here's the rocket engine, and here is the rocket fuel tank. As you might have noticed, I've been implementing LODs, so that should take the load off of some of your computers. That's not the only kind of engine on this ship, though. We've also got these plasma engines. These are called, in my vocab, they're called water jets, because they take water and they use electricity to split it apart and ionize it and recombine it and burn it and throw it out the side, and you get this lovely cascade of gas here, and they provide a fair amount of thrust. They burn both water and electricity, but electricity is relatively easy to generate, and they get a much higher ISP out of the water than you get out of the rocket fuel. So a little bit of water will take you further than a little bit of rocket fuel, but these are much weaker engines, so it'll take you a lot longer to get there. And that's sort of the things I'm going off. Every kind of engine has its own trade-offs based on the amount of thrust it has, the kind of fuel it has, that sort of stuff. But for tech level 0, these are the only two kinds of engines. And they work well. They work well enough. Here is the water tank. These are batteries because you need to have enough power to split the water apart and heat it up and all that stuff. So we've got these battery struts. Carries 3 boxes of supplies. Here is a fuel cell. So one of the neat tricks you can do is you can sort of synergize your systems. The fuel cell generates electricity, which restores your batteries. But it does that by passing water through a complex web of chemicals. And that means that you get electricity out of it, but you also get dirty water, and the water can't be reused again. And that means that your water is going to be used twice. It's going to be used once when it's pure to generate electricity, and then again when it's dirty as fuel, because these guys can burn gray water. And that's stored in the same tanks. Here you can see we've got 992 pure water left, kilograms of pure water left. Whereas no gray, because we've been burning a lot. Since you can use the water twice, it's fundamentally just flat out a better fuel than rocket fuel. And of course, here is where you sit. Room for two, and a light, because why not? There are no landing gears on this because I want to build better landing gears. I have to finish doing that. Now let's talk about the other ship. So the other ship is the Silver Moth, and it's just a little bit different. You might be able to see the differences already. It's got fewer engines, it's a much lighter ship, it's much more spry. Whoa, my demo rock. I went through it. So what's up with this ship? Well, it uses a tiny bit of Tech Level 1 technology, and you can probably see it already. These are Hall drives, Hall thrusters. And basically what you do is you take xenon, or some other chemical similar to it, and you ionize it, and you fire it out the back of the ship at basically light speed, as fast as you can get it. In the real world, it's not anywhere near light speed, but in my game, it's pretty close. And that means that you get a lot of thrust out of almost no fuel. In fact, it uses so little fuel that I don't even bother to keep track. I just kind of by fiat say that the included fuel tanks are enough to keep the engine running forever. So because of that, this is an engine which functionally only requires electricity, which is great because you can generate electricity in a lot of different ways. Unfortunately, the thrust is very low. So the idea here is that this ship has only one rocket engine, and it's built for longer trips. It uses the rocket engines for landing or rapid adjustments, whatever it needs to do there. But it uses the Hall effect thrusters for whatever else it needs to do, long haul acceleration or deceleration. It's also a little bit more stylish with the water tanks vertically. And there's a box down here. Other boxes could be stapled on relatively easily. I just haven't. You notice that it's got one battery pack rather than 4, but the battery pack is much larger. So here you can see the difference. One battery pack instead of 4. And that's the sort of thing that makes designing these ships fun. You can really kind of figure out the sort of optimal scaling that you might want to have. Now, I'm talking about these ships, they're kind of complicated, but in the game world, you don't have to do this. It's fun for me to do it, and it's going to be fun for certain kinds of players. For a lot of players, they're just going to either want to pick a ship that's already been designed, or they're just going to want to slap one together, and you're not going to have to worry about all of this. The idea is that you'll stumble into ships that work just by putting together stuff that seems like it should work. For example, the first time that you build a ship that uses these plasma thrusters, you're going to realize that you need a source of electricity, and you're automatically going to come up and start using these these fuel cells, which also use water, and you're just, without even realizing it, there's going to be synergy there. You're going to be using water twice. It's all going to be good. And of course, larger ships at a higher tech level don't need quite as much optimization. So what else did I want to talk about? Well, in addition to things like LOD, let's go ahead and show you some LOD just because I can. Yep. See it? LOD on this engine here. Nope. And pop. And nope. Pop. But in addition to stuff like that, I also wanted to talk about some of the other tech. So, for example, there are a lot of other kinds of plasma thrusters. These use water, but there is a kind that uses leftovers from other kinds of systems. For example, when you discover antimatter gel at tech level 2, you'll be able to use the antimatter gel in an antimatter reactor or in a really, really powerful chemical rocket that burns antimatter. But you're going to get a lot of that gel back as waste gel, gray gel that does nothing. It has no energy left in it. And there's a kind of maneuvering thruster that burns that instead of water. So you get the same kind of synergy, but in the opposite direction, where instead of the electricity being what turns the water gray, it's the rocket engines that turn the gel gray. So you have two engines that synergize in a different way, which is kind of fun. There's also other kinds of thrusters at higher tech levels, but we'll leave that science fiction stuff for later. Like this isn't science fiction stuff at all. How about getting to other star systems? Well, as you may have noticed, the star maps are all like linked together in a web, and those lines are gravity trails. Those are the lines that you can follow using jump drives. Jump drives are a Tech Level 2 invention, and they have several different categories. The first one you get is ring jump drives. Ring jump drives are huge, like this. But they have a lot of advantages even in the late game, because they are super efficient. You can't go very fast, but they don't burn very much electricity, and they're not as vulnerable to things like interdiction. So it's great, but they're huge. They're very, very big, because they have to encapsulate a certain wavelength. That's the fiction of the universe. A tech level past that, you get much, much smaller ones. They're called arc jump drives, and those are much faster but have a much higher energy cost. And when I say much faster, I mean like an order of magnitude faster. But still, those can only travel along those paths between the stars. Later on, you get spacefold drives. I might change these names, but spacefold drives, which are follow the same pattern. You start with a ring spacefold, and then you get an arc spacefold. And those can travel to any star within the sector or to the nearest star in a neighboring sector, which allows you to start to expand your civilization into other star clusters. The prices on these are extremely high, which is why you're going to have a long time of it. You're going to be like, this ship is important because I just spent like 15 tech level 2 points on a single jump drive. And that's like all the tech level 2 points I've been able to build so far. Obviously, the difficulty can be set. So if you'd prefer, you can lower the difficulty of gaining economy points. I didn't mention things like armor. One of the things about this game that makes it a little bit different is the way that damage works. First off, there's maintenance damage, and that's the kind of damage you're going to run into more often. That happens every day. Maintenance damage happens in a radius, and the radius is determined by a couple of factors related to the size of your ship. But if we were to look down at these guys, the radius would be like this. So you'd get, a couple of pieces get slightly damaged every day, and that kind of maintenance damage happens continuously. Because there's no penalty for having overlapping parts in terms of them not functioning, there is a penalty in terms of them being closer together and therefore getting damaged by maintenance damage more easily. So I mean, I could just stick these in here, wedge them deep inside, but the closer they get, the more maintenance damage they'll tend to take. Actual damage, on the other hand, works in a very similar way, except it takes a couple of other factors into account, such as the armor rating of the objects it's hitting, and stuff like that. So some objects have a negative armor rating, meaning that they're super vulnerable to actual damage. But it's still a radius. So if a rocket hit one of these guys, it would do a radius damage. If a laser hit, it would do a radius damage. Everything does a radius damage. With one little exception, your armor rating on whatever part gets struck is subtracted from the damage that is propagated. So here, for example, is just a flat-out armor plate. And the armor plate is nothing but a big heavy weight, right? But if it gets hit by a weapon directly, or by a meteorite, or by a plasma storm, or whatever, the armor rating of this armor plate is subtracted from that damage before it propagates to anywhere else on the ship, before the radius is calculated. And that means that it can be a lifesaver. It has a very high armor value, and if the thing that hits it doesn't take that armor out, none of the rest of the ship will take any damage at all. So that's great. In addition, if your armor plates are floating off from the ship, like this, connected by some weak strut or something, that's great because it means that your hits, enemy hits or whatever, aren't going to be able to hit the rest of your ship, even if they punch through the armor. But the problem is that you're a much, much larger ship, and you're going to have to cover a much, much larger amount of space with that armor. So you're going to have more armor. Whereas if you do it nice and close, you're going to be able to cover more of your ship with less armor, but you're going to have the problem where if your armor gets breached, then the rest of your ship gets damaged. Now, shielding is another question entirely, and I haven't really figured out how I want to handle it, but there will be some kind of shielding system. If nothing else, it's this game is built specifically to let you mimic other science fiction systems, and if there was no shielding, someone would just mod it in right away. What else have I got here? Other thrusters. There's an antimatter thruster array. More antimatter thruster arrays. Where's the Hall thruster? Here it is. Large Hall drives. Connectors. Yay! Those things are animated. The boiler sink. This takes either water or leftover gray gel, and it heats it up and spits it out, ionizes it, and creates this vast black body cloud, which cools your ship much, much faster than just radiating off of a normal panel of wood. And then it reclaims almost all of that material using magnets. So basically, you have the ability to disperse a huge amount of heat using a vast cloud. The problem is, everyone can see a vast cloud, so you're going to want to be careful. You know, if you're trying to hide, that's not the way to do it. All of this stuff has mass, has a signature, and has a heat rating and all sorts of other stuff that makes it kind of fun. It's combat in this game is not going to be like combat in Space Engineers. This game is more about submarine-style combat, lots more hiding, lots more thinking, and things like hacking, scanning, hiding. Well, it'll be fun. Let's see, we got other things like, obviously, just walkways. Those need a lot of work. I think that's the long and short of it. I mean, I left a whole bunch of components out, and I can add more components in any given day. But I have been working to change to the mix-in system, and that's been a lot of work. And the mix-in system is like what Kerbal uses. So if I take one of these engines here, I don't have a thruster component. I've got what's called a mix-in thruster, and that means that I can drop it into any components, any ship component. I can drop a thruster into it. So I could have a thruster that's not only a thruster, but also a hab zone and a supply depot, and an electricity generator, and a shield generator, and armor plating, and whatever else. So you can mix and match, and you can create whatever sort of result you need. And that makes it quite fun for me. I can just use interfaces and get away with a lot more than I could when I was doing this stuff, as a giant hierarchy. But the mix-in stuff required me to do a lot of work, and so that's what I've spent the last couple of days doing. That and the LODs. Pink LOD. Anyway, I'm not sure what sort of thing I'll release on Saturday, but it may just be more ship stuff. I've been reading up on the stuff for making people. And I'm going to be investigating the UMA structure a little bit more. I don't actually like the UMA system very well. It's got a lot of weird overhead, especially in terms of code that I have to write and stuff like that. I'm going to investigate it, and maybe I'll use it. But what I really want to see is their skeletal structure and how they do bone scaling so well. So maybe they use 2 skeletons and they do some kind of binding. I'm going to be investigating that tomorrow. Have a good one.